Okay, so we are now going to continue our conversation about the deuterostomes, and we're going to take a look at the second phylum or the other phylum within the deuterostomes that we want to pay attention to and focus on. If you remember in the first lecture about deuterostomes, we talked about phylum Echinodermata. Now we're going to talk about phylum Chordata. So everybody within this phylum will have four key features. So in general, we call these the chordates, kind of the general generic term for them, but all of these organisms, all these groups, these classes and orders and families and genuses and species, etc., that all fall under chordata, all have these four big key features. This is what says, okay, you're now in chordata. All right, so the first key feature to mention for phylum Chordata is that everybody in this phylum will have a dorsal nerve cord. So this is a structure that is present during embryological development, and you can see it in the picture right below. This blue thing goes all the way down here. That big blue structure, that is a dorsal nerve cord. In members of phylum Chordata, this will often, not always, but will often develop into the brain and the spinal cord. All right, so that is what the dorsal nerve cord turns into in most members of phylum Chordata. So you have it at the beginning. What it turns into later on, that's what can kind of move us into different classes within the phylum, or subphylum, actually, and then classes. All right, so if we looked at a human embryo, early developmental stages, you're going to have that. We look at a fish embryo, we look at any of these early embryonic stages of members of the phylum Chordata, look for the dorsal nerve cord. The second key feature is this structure known as, remember there's four, make sure you guys get all four. The second key feature is the structure known as a notochord. So right next to the nerve cord is this red line here. That is the notochord. So in some, and I'm emphasizing the word some members of the phylum this will develop into the vertebral column. So think about us. We're mammals. That structure during development starts to turn into our vertebral column. The vertebral column develops around the dorsal nerve cord, the lower portion, which becomes our spinal cord, and then the spinal nerves radiate out from there. We will also see the third structure. These little things called pharyngeal slits, or these little pouches on the side of the embryo here. So these little things here are the pharyngeal pouches. In some, again, I'm trying to emphasize this verbally because you can't see me. In some members of this phylum, those will develop into these gill slits. So look at the shark up here, those little gill slits along the side of its neck, head, face, whatever we want to call that. That develops from the pharyngeal pouches. In other members of the phylum, it may develop into the inner ear bones or the inner ear tubes or other structures within the head region of the member of that phylum. But embryologically, pharyngeal pouches will be present. And then our fourth structure is a thing called the post-anal tail. So down here, tail. We all have a tail. During embryological development, all members of the phylum have a tail. So that tail extends beyond the anus. So here's our little lemur type of primate. There's the tail. There's the anus, post-anal tail. Again, all members of the phylum have this during embryological development, and then what they turn into as you grow into the fetus and then the baby and the etc. varies widely within this particular phylum. But it's how we can identify at the early stages this is going to be a member of this phylum. Let's look at the embryological development of the organism. So, all right, so we talked about this is phylum Chordata. Some of the Chordata do not have a vertebral column. They're still in the phylum, but we call them the non-vertebrate chordates. So sometimes you'll see this listed as the subphylum level. So you got phylum Chordata, subphylum Urochordata. These are animals we call tunicates. So if you look at, let me get the drawing out. If you look at the picture here, they have the notochord, they have the nerve cord, they have, I'm trying to find them, pharyngeal pouches or slits, and then they have the tail, the postanal tail. So all four of the key structures are present. They just don't go much further as they continue to develop into the adult form. This thing over here, these little tube things, these are adult tunicates or members of Urochordata. They're officially chordata, but they don't have a lot of resemblance past the embryological stage with the rest of the phylum. So one kind of weird, goofy group we call non-vertebrate chordates. So, all right. The other kind of goofy group is a group known as the Cephalic Chordata. So again, we're going back to, this is a subphylum. Oh, move these guys down. Subphylum Cephalochordata. These guys are, generically, we call them the lancelets. If you guys have ever used a scalpel, that's what these animals superficially resemble. So that's why they call them a lancelet, resembling a scalpel. Okay, so four key features. We have a notochord, we have a nerve cord, we have the pharyngeal slits, and the postanal tail. There you go. All four criteria are met right there. Now, they don't develop much beyond that. What you're looking at here is pretty much the adult form. These guys live in marine environments. They kind of bury themselves down into the sediment. They have their mouth, or what they call the oral hood, with tentacles sitting above the sediment, filtering and grabbing food out of the water. That's it for this group. This is another subphylum underneath phylum Chordata. So let me move that down just to... So there's phylum Chordata, and then you have subphylum Cephalochordata. These guys are the closest relative to the vertebrates, or what we would call subphylum Vertebrata. So closest living relative to the vertebrates we have out there. So, okay, so this brings us to the vertebrates. Let me move this down. Give us some more space here. Okay, so again, let's start back up here. Phylum Chordata, and then subphylum Vertebrata. These are the vertebrates. So all members of the vertebrates or vertebrata go into this subphylum. All right. So to be in chordata, you have to have those 4 key features. To go into subphylum vertebrata, you now need a set of additional features. There's 5 key features that place an animal into the subphylum vertebrata. So start with the 4 to get you to chordata. Let me put the number here. 4 key features. So you can reduce that. Okay, so 4 key features to be here, and then to go here, subphylum vertebrata, we're looking for 5 key things. All right, number 1 on your list of top favorites is you have a vertebral column. You have a backbone. You have not a spine. All the chordatas have a spine. That's that neural cord. But you have a vertebral column. This develops from the notochord. Yep. And it will develop, and then it's there to protect the spinal cord. So let me jump back up just briefly. Okay, so again, let's go back here. Here's your nerve cord. This blue here, this becomes your spinal cord. Here's your notochord, the red. And as that develops, as it grows, as we mature, this turns into vertebrae in members of subphylum vertebrata that protect and surround the spinal cord. Okay, so all members of, and I can't do all of them, all members of the subphylum vertebrata have that key feature, number 1. Number 2 for key features is all members of our subphylum have a defined head. So if you're scratching yours right now, think about our big gorilla here. He's got a defined head. That's a key feature of members of our subphylum. We go back up to the tunicate. Where's the head? I'm not really sure it has one. Cephalic Chordata, you kind of have a head region up here. Not clearly defined, but here, yeah, you got a head. There's a defined head in members of subphylum vertebrata. There will be a structure known as the neural crest that will be present in members of our subphylum. So this neural crest is a cluster of cells this is actually present during embryological development here, this cluster of cells here, and it will develop into a wide variety of different structures based upon what you're going to become, whether you're going to become a gorilla or a crocodile or a fish or a bird or whatever. In our subphylum, the neural crest is there and then develops into other specialized structures. All members of our subphylum will have an endoskeleton. That's the internal skeleton. All right, so think about here's the skeleton of the crocodile, or actually that's an alligator. We all have that structure present in our body if we're in this subphylum. So now what the skeleton is made up of varies. Some skeletons are bone, others are primarily cartilage. We'll get into that in a little bit here, but there's an internal skeleton. And then the last key feature is that we all have internal organ systems. So some complexity in internal organ systems. We have a closed circulatory system, a heart with blood vessels. We have a digestive system, endocrine, reproductive, etc. Some complex internal organ systems within members of our subphylum. Okay, so in part 2, we're going to actually start jumping into the classes within this subphylum.